You know, my life is kind of like Black Phone 2. Ethan Hawke haunts my dreams every night, but in my dreams, the only thing he's grabbing are D's nuts. Hello everyone, I'm Marcos, and it was me. I wrote that joke. You can throw the tomatoes now. The Black Phone was released in 2021 and was a surprise hit. Ethan Hawke's portrayal of the Grabber added a blood-red feather to the colorful cap that is his filmography. Can The Black Phone 2 live up to the success of the original film? Will the Grabber be canonized in the pantheon of horror icons? We'll figure that out in this video, and we'll paint the Grabber along the way. I have prepped an 8x6 inch canvas. This has become my standard canvas for these paintings. Small enough that it doesn't take too much time to work on, but still big enough to give me some space for details. I'm going to start my construction sketch of the Grabber. I use burnt sienna as my go-to for doing the underpainting, and it's fairly standard underpainting material, as you can see. It is very common for painters to use that. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start laying down the first shapes, and we will catch up with the movie. Black Phone 2 picks up in 1984, 4 years after the events of the original film. Finney and Gwen are now high school students who are dealing with high school problems. Finney finds himself the target of regular attacks by would-be tough guys wanting to prove that they can stand up to the boy who killed the Grabber, while Gwen becomes the victim of increasingly intense nightmares that seem to be drawing her towards the Grabber's abandoned house. Much like the first film, the nightmares are shot in this kind of grungy, old-school Super 8 style camera way from a voyeuristic perspective, and I really love that element of these movies. It really gives you this dirty feeling that you're looking at something that you're not meant to. One night, Gwen finds herself in the Grabber's basement answering a phone call like her brother did 4 years earlier. This call compels her to go investigate a church camp deep into the mountains of Colorado. I appreciate that the story is building on pre-established ideas. We see Gwen's psychic ability intensify as Finney continues to be haunted by the ringing of ghostly telephones, and we watch how they both cope with these supernatural ailments. Gwen leans into it, she wants to explore it and master it, while Finney drowns it out with angst and drugs. The story leads us from the status quo to the new conflict in a natural way. The return of the Grabber feels more like unfinished business than it does feel like a forced retcon. Finney resists going to the church camp as a counselor at first, but he becomes worried that Gwen's friend Ernesto may try to bet her down if she goes alone. So he joins them on this journey out of a sense of brotherly duty. And you should do your duty by subscribing to my channel. Yes, I am making a pitch. You like horror? If you like painting. If you like painting horror. If you like painting.
Subscribe.
Now, this isn't just a love fest. There are a lot of weaker aspects to this film, and I think that the supporting characters are one of the biggest flaws of it. While you do get a few stronger supporting characters like Ernesto and Armando, the rest of the background characters just don't stack up. Armando's cowgirl niece and the church couple don't have much character outside of the one-word descriptions that I've just given them. They are the type of characters that are introduced in horror films that exist only to be killed off, and that becomes a problem with this movie later on, which I will discuss when we get there. If you've seen my previous videos, you'll know that I don't like to speak too harshly on actors. It's an art form that I don't entirely understand, and the few times that I've tried to do it myself, I was awful at it. So when I judge an actor's work, it's not because I think I can do better than them or that I have a deep understanding of the craft, because I don't. I struggle to act interested in like a conversation for more than 10 seconds. I'm awful. All that is to say, I didn't completely buy into Madeleine McGraw's portrayal of Gwen. Now, I don't think she was bad by any means. There were a few scenes where she had to lead a monologue, and they weren't entirely convincing. I think she did an awesome job in the action scenes and works well against other actors, but I think she lacks a conviction in her voice when she is the sole focus of the scene. She also had to spout out vulgar one-liners on occasion. Some of them landed, others didn't, but that is more of a writing problem than an acting problem, so I wouldn't blame her on those. Otherwise, I think the character of Gwen was well realized and likable. I'm not sure if having Finney step back a bit as a supporting character was a great idea. It just didn't have much for him to do in this one. So I'm going to call it there for the underpainting of the Grabber. I do have all the big broad shapes that I need. I got them down pretty well. I'll have to do some shifting as the full painting goes into swing. Now, on to color mixing. And of course, I can't complete this review without talking about the Grabber. Ethan Hawke really shined in the first movie, and without him, The Black Phone would have been just a run-of-the-mill supernatural thriller. He swings wildly from being threatening to weak and vulnerable. He was a man becoming unglued, someone who had a loose handle on life that was rapidly escaping his grasp. His look with that mask projected a cool cinematic strength that we'd expect from a horror icon like Jason Voorhees or Michael Myers. But his character was far more nuanced than those of the classic slasher boogeymen. He was far more in line with real-life serial killers, preyed upon the weak and was emotionally unstable, which makes his ultimate demise in the first film so satisfying. Bad men like him do exist, and bad men like him deserve to face justice. So how is the Grabber in The Black Phone 2? Well, he's in it. This is where I'm going to talk a little bit more about spoilers, so go take a hike if you want to avoid them. We learn that the Grabber has been doing his thing far longer than the events of the first film show, and by doing his thing, I mean killing little boys. He was at some point an employee of the church camp. Apparently he did a little maintenance work, taught ice skating, and as an extracurricular activity, taught kids how to take an axe to the face. With the Grabber's expanded backstory in this film, you'd expect him to take an even larger role than he did in the previous. But unfortunately, that's just not the case. The new ghostly form of the Grabber is awesome. He is far more imposing and demonic than he was in the first film, which indicates an evolution of his character. When portions of his mask are removed, we see nothing but raw red sinew beneath, and it looks incredible. But like his skin, his character is completely stripped away, and what is left behind is nothing more than a one-note horror villain. Now, I don't necessarily hate a one-note villain. It can really work sometimes. However, the problem here is that we just don't get enough of him. Ethan Hawke, while still good as the Grabber, just doesn't have the time to shine like he did before. He should really feel like more of a threat this time around with his supernatural ability, but he doesn't even rise to the level of the first Black Phone. And this will be the biggest spoiler I give away here. The Grabber does not kill a single character in this movie. Now, we do see him brutalize victims in the past, but we do not see him kill anybody during the course of this film as the Ghost Grabber. And I can't think of another horror film that does that outside of the Poltergeist. I think that the filmmakers were trying to do something different in this and kind of defy expectations. And I don't necessarily hate the idea, I just think that this was the wrong movie to explore that in. All that the Grabber accomplishes in this movie is cutting up a few people and then scaring a few others. You can go to basically any camp in real life and have that same exact experience. We really needed to see the monster in action. We really needed to see why we should be afraid of him. It was nice to see the damage that he had caused in the past, but we have to see how strong he can be now that he's been unshackled from mortality. How much worse can a serial killer get when he no longer has to worry about his well-being? When everything good has been burned away, when his only limitation is his imagination? That could be the subject of something truly horrifying, and they never capitalize on that. They should have shown the Grabber using his newfound nightmare powers to terrorize the camp, and we even had perfectly expendable side characters for him to run through. That would have gone a long way in showing that this new Grabber was something worth fearing. The Grabber was instrumental to the success of the first film, and I think that they did a disservice to the second film by not letting him become a real threat. If they continue the Black Phone series, they need to find a way to make the third film the Grabber's film. Finney and Gwen had their fun, now it's time for old Wild Bill to get his spotlight. While I did have my gripes about how this film handles some of its characters, I do not have a negative thing to say about it from a visual standpoint. I love the setting. A campground is one of the best backdrops a horror film can have, and it feels like it's been a while since I've seen a movie properly set in one. The empty cabins, the open white landscape capped by imposing mountains really gives a sense of isolation. They emulate the era convincingly. It feels like the early 80s without shoving it down your throat or making too many obvious references. The movie at no point insults the intelligence of its viewers. And now for the reveal of my finished painting. I went into this movie with a set of expectations that was built up by the original, and I was excited to see what the Grabber would do now that he is released from the restraints of mortality. But to my disappointment, the movie didn't quite deliver on its potential. But great visuals, fun character interactions, and an interesting plot makes this movie a worthwhile watch. I give this movie a bronze medal. What did you think of The Black Phone 2? Did you want to see more Grabber like I did? If so, please consider leaving a comment, liking this video, maybe even subscribe. That's all I have to say. Goodbye now.